This is Red Podcast, episode number 230. Jeff Goins has a new book called Real Artists Don't Starve, and I'm giving you my perspective from working with artists for the last 20 years. That's coming up.
This is the Red Podcast. How to reach more people, establish your authority, and deliver your message. Here's your host, David Hooper.
I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and every day on my way to school, I would go down this street called Music Row. And Music Row is actually two streets. It's 16th Avenue and 17th Avenue. Each of them is one way. So if you go down one to get back, you've got to come down the other. On Music Row, you'll see a lot of old houses, big houses that have been converted into office buildings. But you'll also see a lot of modern, newer buildings that belong to record labels. They belong to publishing companies. There's several recording studios on Music Row, and it was especially that way in the 70s when I was growing up. So on one hand, when I looked at artists and the music business especially, I saw a lot of money. I saw a lot of success. Yet, there was this rumor, this thought, this story that a lot of people told themselves that artists starve. And I certainly saw some of that. If you would go down to Broadway, downtown Nashville, you would see a lot of guys looked more or less homeless with an acoustic guitar, just playing songs, trying to get somebody to listen to them, trying to get somebody to pitch them a few bucks so they could eat. I saw both sides of the argument. I saw a lot of successful people in music and in entertainment, and I saw a lot of people who weren't making any money at all. What's the difference? How do some artists make so much money and others barely get by? That's what this episode is about. This is the Red Podcast, the podcast for experts. If you want to make more money with your specialized knowledge, if you've got a message that you want to spread and you want to make people care about it, this is the podcast for you. This episode brought to you by createyourlist.com. If you want to quickly build an email list, get your first 1,000 subscribers, createyourlist.com has a free resource for you to check out. It's all of the best practices, what's working right now when it comes to building an email list and making money with it. Go to createyourlist.com to get it now. Jeff Goins is a name you may be familiar with, especially if you hang out in marketing circles. He's had a few successful books. He's a local guy. I know him personally, known him for a few years. So I was excited when he came out with a new book, especially about this topic, because as I just mentioned, this is something that I've seen all my life, literally all my life. And working in the entertainment industry like I have, music, television, and film, I've talked to a lot of people about this, seen how they've approached it firsthand. So because of this, I was very curious about Jeff's take on the subject. Real Artists Don't Starve. That's the title of the book, but what did he have to say about it? This book is divided into three parts: mindset, market, and money. I'm going to talk about some of the different aspects that Jeff talked about within the book. And if you're interested in hearing more, hearing it in his voice, this is a book for you. Go to redpodcast.com/230. I'll have everything linked up. There's a great audiobook version of this. A friend of mine, a local radio guy, Stu Gray, voiced it. And if you're interested in getting a free copy of that, I've got your opportunity. redpodcast.com/230 to find out more. So let's talk about the mindset. This is the first section of Jeff's book. He talks about the foundation. I think this is a very interesting question, certainly a debate I've had several times over the years. Are great artists born or are they made? Just got a quote: before you can create great art, you first have to create yourself. I agree with this 100%. Working in the music industry, I found so many people, young artists, they would come to town and they were doing what anybody else wanted them to do. And they would have a little bit of interest from a label, a little bit of interest from a publishing company, a manager, a booking agent, and they lose all backbone. They lose all identity. They say, I don't know, what do you want me to do? And on one hand, that makes sense, because if you've got mentors, people that you look up to in the industry, and they're going to help you out with your career, they've likely had more experience than you've had. But on the other hand, they're not you. So if you go for their vision of what they think will be successful, you're going to be in trouble. Now, what I've seen when this happens is that a lot of times there is that initial success because you are working with established people in a creative industry, and they know what's going to get those doors opened. But relatively quickly, because you're not being you, you're being someone else, what someone else wants you to be, you can't keep it up. You're a hack. You're not making art. You're basically doing a copy of someone else's work. You're a cover band. You're the starving artist who's copying a Picasso or a Monet or somebody else's work. You're not doing what you should be doing. Before you can create great art, you first have to create yourself. It's got another great quote here as well. There's no greater pain than living a lie when the truth is buried deep inside you. I never understood when I was growing up, and even when I was into the music business for a few years, why somebody with success who's selling millions of albums, who's doing very well when it comes to touring, making a lot of money that way, selling out arenas, T-shirts on kids across the country, why you would walk away from that. And there are a lot of reasons to walk away from that. But one of the big ones is that it's not you. You're being someone else. This happens not just in the entertainment industry. This happens all across the board. When it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to being the public face of a company, an expert in your case, we get caught up in going for that early success, thinking if we act a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, that's going to get us in the door. And it does. Like an artist, those doors can open up rather quickly when you do what everybody else wants. But it's not a good long-term strategy. You would not believe how many people come up to me and they appreciate the freedom that I've got because I can do what I want to do, say what I want to say. And you've heard this because you listen to Red Podcast. For example, I've got a gay pride episode coming up. I'm not gay. Why did I do a gay pride episode? Well, you can learn a lot from gay pride when it comes to marketing your business. Yet so many people that I know, they're afraid to touch a subject like that. Maybe they market to the Christian church. They've got this image where they're afraid of agitating people. Not me. And wouldn't you like to have that kind of freedom? Well, that's what Jeff is talking about. Before you can create great art, you first have to create yourself. You can be whoever you want to be. Maybe you are that Christian guy who's going for the super conservative crowd. In that case, go for it. Don't apologize. But don't be someone else. I want to talk about the pre-foundation. How do we get to this point? How do we think that we have to do something else, something that somebody else wants, something that somebody else is in order to make money with our art? Now, I'm going to take you back to when I was a kid growing up in Nashville. Like a lot of kids, I was into music. I was growing up all around it. So one of the things that I did when I was a teenager, playing in a band, doing my own music, recording, writing, performing, I thought I was going to be a professional player. That was my goal at the time. And I had a lot of opportunities to make money in the music business, being in a music town. So one of the things that I did was I got a job doing roadie work. When acts would come to town, I would set up stages, I would tear them down. And I was working for a guy named Mike. Mike was my boss. He was also a musician. I looked up to him. He was a mentor of mine. It's about 3 a.m. We're tearing down a set from a band that had played that night. And one of the things he told me, he said, David, you need to get a good toolbox if you're going to be a musician. And I'm thinking he's talking in metaphor, trying to give me some deep advice. He was not. He told me to start collecting tools, put them in my toolbox, hammers, saws, screwdrivers, because that's what he thought it was going to take in order for me to make a living in the music industry. That feeling, which is so entrenched in the music industry, in the entertainment industry, you may have heard the joke if you've ever been out to Los Angeles. You meet somebody, she'll say she's an actor. You say, oh, what are you, waitress? Like sex and drugs, it's entrenched in our industries. And it's not true, because every day as a kid, I saw it wasn't true. Going down Music Row on my way to school, big buildings, big recording studios, successful people, nice cars. It is not true, but we believe it. This is the truth. When you're creating art, when you have your own business, starving is a choice. You can call your own shots. You can do things the way you want to do them, especially today when you can plant your flag and, thanks to the internet, find people who are just like you. Jeff Goins talks about this all throughout his book. He's got some amazing stories that you'll find inspirational. So if you're making art, that's what you consider your work, and I consider all work to be art, and you want to see that it's possible to make money with that art, with that work, this is going to be a great book for you. Back to how entrenched this value is. One more thought on that. Before I walked into the studio to record this episode, I went to Amazon.com. I was looking at Jeff's book to see how well it was doing, to see what the initial reviews were. There are a few not recommended reviews, 1 stars, 2 stars. And the reason is because people don't believe that this is possible. It's absolutely possible. If you look at people and you see that they've done it, it's possible. Now, is it possible for you? Let's talk more about that. One of the topics that Jeff talks about in Real Artists Don't Starve, he talks about originality. Jeff says, don't worry about it. And I agree. It's perspective that makes things original. Rick Roberts, good friend of mine, stand-up comic, does over 100 gigs a year. He's been working at that level for the last 20 years. I had a conversation with him on episode 109, redpodcast.com/109 if you want to hear it. He told me a story one time, and I think this speaks to the fact that nothing is original, but our perspective is what makes it work. If you've watched late night television ever, they all come on about the same time, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And a lot of times the host of the show, he'll come out, do a stand-up routine before the show really gets going, and it will be about the day's events. It's what's happening right there, right then. These jokes, they're written that day. People don't have time to steal jokes, yet if you watch NBC, CBS, ABC, a lot of times you'll hear the very same joke, same punchline, maybe a little bit of a different perspective. That's the only thing that sets them apart on each of those stations. How is that? It's because we're all thinking the same thing. Good ideas, they rise to the top. Now, I don't know where you think ideas come from. A lot of songwriters, we're going to take it back to the music business example, this conservative Christian example, something that I'm surrounded by all throughout Nashville. A lot of these guys think it comes from some kind of supernatural power. God is sending that message down to their head, coming right through their hand, putting it on paper. That's where songs come from. I don't know. It comes from somewhere. And a lot of times people think of the very same ideas, and the only thing that separates those ideas are the execution of them and the personality behind them, the perspective. So if you're worried about being original, I agree with Jeff Goins. Don't worry about it. But do worry about having a perspective. Do worry about putting your stamp on that idea. It needs to know that it comes from you. And this should happen throughout all of your marketing, every single bit of it. If you got a podcast, for example, I don't want to be able to replace you with somebody else. The same for writing books, blogs, live speeches. It needs to be obvious that it's you. At the very top of the list, what you're doing, it needs to be obvious that it's from you. The originality, way to the back of it. Perspective and personality, that's what matters. Couple stories. Hunter S. Thompson, you may know him. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's made into a movie. A lot of people have seen the movie. They haven't read the work. This guy's a great writer. Very descriptive. The book on Hell's Angels, absolutely worth reading. redpodcast.com/230 if you want to link to that. When you read his words, he's got an original style. But what you might not know about him is he hand-copied Ernest Hemingway's Farewell to Arms, every single word of it, to figure out how it worked, to figure out Hemingway's voice. And that's how he created his own. I know a lot of famous musicians, they'll take a song that's well-written. I know one guy who did it with the Beatles, Let It Be, tried to figure it out, and that's how he came up with his own hit. We learn through copying. The bottom line of this, from my perspective, is sometimes originality, you're actually going to starve more because people aren't used to it. You want to give people something that they're used to, but it's a different perspective on what they're used to. Another one of the big things that Jeff says in this book that I really love, he says, performance is still practice. Another great Rick Roberts story. He was talking to me about Chris Rock. And by the way, there's a great Chris Rock story in Jeff's book. This is a different one that I'm going to share with you. So Rick Roberts, as I mentioned, he's a comic. He's been doing hundreds of performances per year for at least 20 years. Chris Rock, also a comic, if you're not familiar with him, one of the best and most successful comics in the world. And when Chris Rock wants to come up with new material, he goes and performs it. That's the only way to know if a performance is going to work live. You can't do it in a lab. You can't do it in a studio. Performance, it works two ways. You give, they receive. They give through applause, you receive. It's a transfer of energy. It goes back and forth and back and forth. Give, receive, give, receive. And that's how comics work. That's how podcasting works. That's how your blog works. Nobody wants to release something into a vacuum where it's not heard. What you do doesn't matter, at least for anybody other than you, if nobody experiences it. So Chris Rock, what he'll do when he wants to test something, he'll go out with a couple of guys who write for him, Arsenio Hall being one of them. Those two people will open the show, get a read on the crowd. Then they'll go to the back of the room while Chris is performing, and they'll take notes of how the audience is reacting. They'll figure out what works, what doesn't. After Chris Rock's performance, they'll get together. They'll figure out what works, what doesn't. They'll change it. The show will be different the next night. Performance is still practice. Jeff says something similar to what I just did. He says, partner with the audience. Remember, give and then receive. You give, then you receive. They give, then they receive. Partner with the audience. You probably heard the saying, perfect is the enemy of good. And it is. How does something become perfect? You take it on the road, you perform it, you get it in front of an audience. If you're worried about this, Jeff has a lot of good advice in this book, a lot of motivation that will encourage you to get out and do it now. redpodcast.com/230 for more information on how to get this book, including if you're interested in the audiobook, I've got an opportunity for you to get it free. Let's talk about money, talk about getting paid. That was one of the big sections of Jeff's book. We don't work for free. That's what he says. I say the same thing. Have you read my 10 commandments for entrepreneurs? I talk about this as one of my 10 rules. We don't work for free. If you're interested in those rules, redpodcast.com/rules has them. Get the free download now. Get paid. Now, that's not necessarily getting paid with money. Stephen Pressfield, in his book, War of Art, and also Turning Pro, he talks about the secondary payoff. There are two paychecks that you get. There's the money that you get. Maybe that second one is satisfaction. It's the good feeling that you get from helping people, from entertaining them, from showing them how to succeed. But you must get paid. Don't be a martyr. Don't do work for exposure. When I was a kid, we played this game called Oregon Trail. You may have played it. You die from exposure. And artists can die from exposure too. You can't deposit exposure in the bank. Own your work. This is very important. I think this is one of the best things that Jeff talks about in the book, Real Artists Don't Starve. I started this episode talking about when I was a kid, driving down Music Row on my way to school. Some of the biggest buildings that I saw, publishing companies. I didn't know what publishing companies were. I thought publishing, they must be printing up sheet music. And it is that, but it's also owning the underlying composition, not just the paper with notes on it, but actually owning the song, that underlying composition. So let me tell you a quick music publishing story. When I went to music school, I was in a music business class learning about the music industry. Publishing companies, that's what my professor told me, they are the people that are making the most money in the music business. Own your stuff. That week, I started a music publishing company. Easy to set up. I was a songwriter. I officially published my own material. I also did deals with other songwriters looking for a publishing deal. I had nothing to offer other than marketing, and that's how I got into music marketing. But I owned a lot of what I was marketing. And the result of that is today, over 20 years later, I still make money on the work that I did then. In fact, this has allowed me to walk away from real work for years, allowing me to only work on the projects that I want to work on and turn down the money projects that I don't want to work on, the stuff that doesn't add value to the world, the stuff that doesn't interest me, the stuff that makes me feel like I'm working a job. Not owning your own stuff. That's why you see a lot of old musicians, old actors, old comics. They're still on the road, still doing that hours for dollars thing, still working at 60, 70, 80 years old, way longer than they would have liked to have worked, at least that hard. I'm not saying you should quit work. I'm going to be working till the day I die, but I'm going to pick the projects that I want to work on. And if you're interested in doing that, Own Your Stuff. The book is Real Artists Don't Starve. I'm talking about art here. My background is in the music industry. I know I'm going overboard on the music business examples that I'm giving you, but I got one more for you. Macarena. You know the song, huge dance sensation in the late 90s. Everybody was doing it. You can probably hear the chorus in your head right now. Let me tell you the story behind that. The original song was not what you heard. The one that you heard, some DJs took the original song, put a beat behind it, and then that became the hit. That post-production work that they did, RCA Records came to them. They said, oh man, we love this song. We think it's got potential. We'll give you a flat fee and a record deal if you're willing to sign the rights over to us. They said, oh, that sounds great because we did this song. It's a great song. It's starting to take off. We can surely do better when we have our full record album with RCA behind us. So they did the deal. Macarena, a huge international hit. Even today, if you go to a wedding, a lot of times you're still going to hear the Macarena 20 years later. And these dudes sold out for $1,500. They're not making a dime. Own your stuff. I'm going to leave you with a final thought that Jeff talks about. I think this is important. He talks about doing the projects that you want to do. I mentioned that. Having that music publishing money, it certainly helped me to do the projects that I want to do, and owning your stuff will help you to do the same thing. He's got a quote that's related to this. He says, make money to make art. A lot of times, in my 20 plus years in the music industry, I work with really hot acts that were great as far as imaging, but the music, it's kind of trendy. It's like a Macarena kind of thing, and it may not be trendy in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Or maybe it's the kind of thing, it's not getting radio airplay, it's not getting play on MTV. It's an underground thing. Kids like it, but there's not a whole lot of money to be made from the music. However, there was an opportunity for these acts to make a lot of money, a lot of times via merchandise, t-shirts, clothing, other kind of things with their logo on it. And I'd have a lot of acts, and they'd say, no, we're musicians, man. We're musicians. We're not a t-shirt company. And I'd have to explain this to them. So, whoa, man. The t-shirts are what's going to enable you to get on the road. The t-shirts that these kids are going to be wearing, it's what's going to be advertising your stuff. The t-shirts, that's what's making you money so you can do the music. And that's what Jeff's talking about. Make money to make art. I know a band. I'm not even going to mention their name because you've never heard of them. $1 million in t-shirt sales. These guys had one hit, got a little late night airplay on MTV. Mostly, they were known for colleges around the Southeast, big frat parties, big school parties. Average person wouldn't have heard of them. $1 million in t-shirts. That's how they made their money. That's what enabled them to get on the road. One more funny t-shirt story. I'll go out with this. This is the power of t-shirts. A couple years ago, I see a woman, she's in my yoga class. She's wearing a Run DMC t-shirt. I used to work for Run DMC. So I go up to her. I go, hey, Run DMC. I love him. Used to work for him. She's like, I'm actually a Jay-Z fan. Had no idea who Run DMC was. She knew they were a rap band, but she knew that iconic logo more. That's what I'm talking about. Leverage your art to make money with something other than your art so you can make more art. The book, it's called Real Artists Don't Starve. It's a fantastic book. redpodcast.com/230 for information on how to get hold of it, including an opportunity to get hold of the audiobook for free. If you're interested in what I've been discussing, you'll absolutely want to check this book out. redpodcast.com/230. Thank you so much for listening to Red Podcast. If you've got questions, you've got comments, you want to reach out, @David Hooper on Twitter is the best way to do it. On the next episode, got another big picture book to help you with mindset. Also coming up, my annual Gay Pride episode. To make sure that you don't miss either, go to redpodcast.com. In the top left, you'll see a few buttons. Each one of them allows you to subscribe to Red Podcast with one click. If you've got an iPhone, one click. Android, one click. You want the app? You want to listen via the web? One click is all it takes to get every episode of Red Podcast delivered to you, each one of them free of charge. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you tell a friend about me, and I'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Red Podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now with your iPhone, Android, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.
Now, that's not necessarily getting paid with money. Stephen Pressfield, in his book Art of Work, talk art work.